Hand loaders, bullet casters, welcome back to my bench. Hey folks, we talked a lot about this Lyman Victory Brass-Smith press in a video, and it got a lot of attention. A lot of people are real curious about this Brass-Smith line. There are a lot of similarities between the priming system on this Victory single stage and the Lyman All-American 8. Okay, now I haven't had the opportunity to work with one of the All-American 8s, but what it does appear is that the priming system is very much similar. And in my video where I reviewed this press, I had a lot of good things to say about it. I wasn't particularly fond about a couple of things. One thing I emphasized a lot was that shell holders were critical, okay? And that's something that perhaps I think I need to talk a little bit more about. I recently got a comment from, I think his name was 357 GAZ, 357 Gaz, I believe it was. And he saw the video and I guess was a little bit curious, wanting a little bit more information on my position on the shell holders. So I want to focus on that right now because other shell holders than Lyman will work, and I'm not sure if perhaps I maybe it was a little bit too hard, or I can't really remember, but I did discourage the use of non-Lyman shell holders, and I still stand by it, but I think it's only fair that I get into a little bit more detail about why that is. So let me bring you in for this closer look, and I'm going to start with this RCBS number 18 shell holder. This is what you'd be using for your 44 variety, your 44 Russian, 44 Special, 44 Magnum. I'm also going to show with the Lee number 11 shell holder, which is good for also those same calibers. And I've chosen those because Lee and RCBS are most likely going to be the ones that most of you are going to be dealing with if you're not coming from a Lyman setup. This one here is the Lyman number 7 shell holder for the same calibers. And what I want to do is just kind of put each one in, and I want you to see the difference here. So we'll start with this RCBS, and hopefully I can pick up some of the detail that I want to show you, because it is fine detail, and honestly we're really kind of working in the neighborhood of thousandths of an inch. So I'm going to bring you in, and I want you to see this is the maximum depth that the primer punch is going to protrude through the shell holder. And I might even take you back for a better view of it. Notate this little ring right here. Okay, that's going to be very important because that's ultimately where the end of the punch for the primer punch is resting at. I'm going to pull this back up so hopefully you can see a little bit better perspective, but you can kind of tell that this line that I just spoke of is pretty much a halfway point between this point here, the bottom of this sleeve, and the top of the sleeve. So let us kind of focus on that because that's going to let us know where the punch is going to be pressing the primer up to. All right, so here with this RCBS shell holder, we're just about dead even with where the head stamp of the case would reside. Okay, so which is fine for RCBS presses and probably fine for the Lee presses because they're designed with this shell holder in mind. So take good note of that, because that is going to affect how deep that primer will seat. Now I'm pushing on this lever right now very similarly to how I would if I were seating a primer. All right, so that's our RCBS. Now we're going to just back it back out and see if we can put the Lee one in there, see what we come up with. This RCBS is mighty tight in there as well, I should note. Not sure if that means a great deal. Here is our number 11 from Lee. Let's stick this one in here. And it is a much looser fit, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That might actually help keep things centered. And as we come down again, let's bring you back in. Okay, so here we are, kind of that same point. Once again, note this center section is pretty much even and flush with this point here where the head stamp of the case will reside. Once again, I'm kind of pushing on it just to see what its final depth is going to be. That's why I see it wiggling in the picture a little bit. Okay, and just to bring it back out in case you need that perspective one more time, just recall, and I'll even rotate this around a little bit if I can. I'm going to rotate this shell holder just so that, well, that's not going to really give the perspective I wanted. Okay, but anyways, what we did see is that point right there, is pretty much only going to give you a flush primer at best. All right, now you can still use them. Flush will work, but I will say that I did end up having some primers that didn't light off and a couple of my revolvers that I attribute to this. This is the Lyman. Okay, now can we see how much deeper we're really at here? All right, I'm going to kind of rotate back. It's not a huge difference, but like I said, we're fooling with measurements that are going to easily be in the area of thousandths of an inch. Okay, but that difference is a good bit more than what we had with the other two. And if you're, pretty thorough in your thought process and, seating primers, you probably check them pretty regularly, just running your finger. You can feel when a primer is recessed and when a primer is just kind of sitting flush just by running your finger over it. And this has made all the difference in the world. Okay, so yes, the other ones will work. However, you might not get the performance that you're wanting out of it with a non-Lyman shell holder. And I still feel like Lyman is a little bit misleading when they say that it will work with any shell holder. So I really don't feel like it's a stretch to say that shell holders are very much different. Over here we have the RCBS and we have this Lee. And while there are some subtle differences, they ultimately do seem to pretty much follow the same pattern in how the height is that they will rest the case in relation to the ram on the press. We come over here to Lyman. And this is a much lower profile shell holder. You can see that it will hold the case a significantly large amount. And when I say large, again, we're dealing in thousandths of an inch. We're dealing in the kind of measurements that separate a flush primer between a recessed primer. So it's not a whole lot. But when we're dealing with this, if you can see it by eyesight, then it is a pretty good amount. So yeah, the shell holder here, Lyman, is a much different animal than its two counterparts here on the left. So I think this should be a good, strong consideration into, whether this press is right for you or not. So 357 GAZ, I hope this also helped. And like I said, feel free to use other shell holders. Just understand that you might have some priming difficulties. So, folks, thank you. Like, subscribe, and I'll be seeing you again soon.